Mr. Clark, Ms. Zimmerman, Ms. Brown, Mr. Horrell, Ms. Lopes. Here. Mr. Hostel,
Here.
Mr. Savage,
Here.
Mr. Williams,
Here.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts. Here. Mr. Sanders,
Here.
Ms. Deming, Mr. Sanchez, Ms. Dyer. Here. Ms. Connell, Mr. Liba,
I am here, thank you.
Ms. Agers. Here. Ms. Fast. Here. Mr. Cryer,
Here.
Ms. Morrow. Thank you. Mr. Ward,
Here.
Mr. Cantu, join as a panelist. Ms. Nguyen, Mr. O'Brien, Mr. Smith, Mr. Maderos.
Here.
Through the chair, we have a quorum.
Okay, great, thank you. At this time, I'm going to read a little memo or message about how we start off the day. First thing is welcome, good morning to all of you that are in all three offices, as well if there's any public online. At this time, the Air Pollution Control District meeting has started. We would ask that all electronic devices would be turned and put on mute or on airplane control. And definitely those type of electronic devices. At this time, also on each agenda item, I will announce the number and what the item is, so that way the people online or on phone or Zoom would at least know what item we're on. So we'll be doing that as well each time. And I'll definitely make sure I don't forget. If so, somebody throw something at me, okay? So that I don't forget. I appreciate it. Again, welcome to all. And again, thank you all of the CAC members for being at the three locations. I really appreciate that. And I think by us having a quorum each time gives that, shows that the CAC is greatly concerned about what goes on in this valley and what is being done by ARB and what is being done by EPA. So I think that's important. So again, I welcome all of you. At this time, we'll go into the item number 3 is the approval of the minutes from the February 7th meeting of 2023. And
Through the chair, Mr. Cunha,
yes, sir.
I'm here.
Oh, Mr. Clark.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Mayday.
So we have another quorum. We've got a definite quorum. Thank you. And you look very good, Mr. Clark.
They call me Mr. Quorum for nothing.
Yes, as Samir said, we have a super quorum now, so we're in good shape. But you look very good. Great to have you at the meeting. Thank you, Les. Okay, at this time, we'll go to item 3 again, the minutes. And if there's any corrections or changes, I will entertain them at this time. I will go up to the north. Is there any changes that the members up in the north, board members first? Hearing none, I will go to the south. Any changes in the south from the CAC members? Let me bring it back here to Fresno. Is there
Just one comment, Mr. Chair.
yes?
And maybe I was different. I didn't receive these beforehand and just received them now, which makes it, and along with the other material. So I don't know if for some reason I didn't get the email that was sent, or I received one last night. but
Through
that
the chair, yeah, it went out on Friday afternoon.
Okay, then,
I'll
But one
double
thing,
check.
we'll double check the contact information to make sure that it's getting to the right place. And one other thing, you may want to also check your spam filter.
Okay.
Sometimes, it's happened to me. I get, for some reason, an email and ends up dropping in there. So, but we'll definitely double check on our end and get back to you, make sure we got the right contact information.
thank you.
Great, sorry about that. And again, if anybody else has those issues, please contact the staff here at the district, and they'll make sure that everybody's got their right emails and correspondence, okay? And if not, give me a call. I think everybody has my cell phone. Just give me a call, and we can make things also, if we have to send it from my office, what I have, be happy to do that. Okay, any comments or changes from the central office here, from the CAC members, before I go to the public? Hearing none or seeing none, let's go to the public. In the north, any comments from the public from either Zoom or by phone? Hearing none in the north, let's go to the south. Any
No
public
members of the
comment?
public in the south.
How many? None?
No, sir.
Okay, okay, great, thank you. And in the north, do we have someone in the north in the office there?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm sorry. This is Kathy. There are no public members in the north.
Okay, great. I appreciate that. Thank you. Then let's bring it back here to the main, to the central office. Any public comments at that time, either here or in?
There's no indication of public comments in office or online.
Okay, great. At this time, we will approve the minutes from the February 7th and go forward with them. Okay, all right. Second, great. Most of the time, we don't have to take a roll on it, but I appreciate the motion and the second. That even gives us, that gives us even more solidness to that. So thank you very much. All right, let's go to item number 4, which is at this time is the public, is to comment on any item that is not on the agenda. And the agenda was sent out last Friday, so people in the public could get those and see if there's any questions. But at this time, I will open up in the north. Any public comments wish to be made at this time? Again, it's on non-board, non-board items. In the north, public?
There are no public comments in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south.
No public comment in the south.
Great. Let's bring it back here to the central office. Any public comments?
There's no indication of public comment in the office or online.
Okay, great. Thank you. All
Through
right,
the chair, we also have Ms. Morrow and Ms. Brown in attendance, correct?
yes, great. Thank you both. Thank you. And if you want to get a little bit of goodies, those that came late, they're in the back there, and you can eat during the meeting, please, and drink coffee or water, whatever.
As I demonstrate.
You've done very well. Excellent. And I thank the staff and everybody for the goodies. I appreciate it. Let's go to item number 5, chair comments. Again, the only thing I will say is that I am very pleased and very much thank God for the rain and the snow that we've gotten. I know that it's been bad for a variety of community people, but also even for the farmers. I do know that yesterday when I was out driving, I saw some bees with little heaters on their backs flying around, and they were excited to have the sunlight. So the bees are out and happy, and the bees are happy today too. So that's a good thing, but I really do appreciate Mother Nature's efforts to get us snow and to protect those trees and everything in the hills, but also to build up our aquifers. And again, that's a positive thing, and appreciate that part of it. At this time, I have nothing else but to say, again, thank you to all the members for being in attendance and being a part of making a quorum of the CAC, which is very important. And again, those parts of how you play a role in the CAC, getting to the community and getting to those folks to let them know what's going on and what's happening and what their needs may be and the type of programs we have available at this district for the community people, even from the fireplace, the tune-up car famous program, by Jamie Holt. That is her program from day one. And so we have those programs, and those type of things are really nice to have the members of the CAC communicating with the people in their community. Let's go to item number 6, the Executive Director, Mr. Samir. Welcome aboard, young man.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for your generosity in so many ways. I appreciate you and the CAC. This might be, trying to remember how when the last time was that we had such a well-attended in-person meeting like this. So this is wonderful to see everybody here and the offices there. I really appreciate all of you for what I hope is an ongoing trend in just having, really solid participation at these meetings. For those of you that haven't worked with me, I know we've got some, relatively new members on the CAC. Please feel free to reach out to me directly if you ever wanted to chat about air quality. I think sometimes a one-on-one conversations, if you ever have any questions or ideas, just feel free to give me a call. Just wanted to offer that as well as you acclimate into this sort of air quality, world of things. And I just appreciate the chair for working so hard to make sure, that we have great attendance here and that our vacancies are all filled. And it's such an important group that provides, such important feedback on everything that we do here. So we have an interesting agenda for you today. I'll just give you a couple of quick updates. I wanted to talk a bit about the ag burning phase-out strategy, give you just a quick report. We provided to our board a report on this, and it's available online. We'd be happy to come back to the CAC and provide a similar update as we continue implementing the phase-out. It has been a tremendous success so far. It's been a lot of work, mainly, actually all of it really on the part of the ag industry here in the San Joaquin Valley, who's been working hand in hand with the Air District to implement this phase out over these last couple of years. It's very difficult. It's a major change. What we're dealing with now is the smallest operations are the ones that are seeing the impending deadlines. There was a deadline that just came up at the end of last year, and another one coming up at the end of this year for the remaining categories as we continue that phase out through the end of next year, which is the final date for all the different categories that are covered by the phase out. But it's been a tremendous success overall. There's been, we used to burn about 1 million tons per year, actually well over 1 million tons per year in the San Joaquin Valley. We've had a whole journey in trying to phase this out. A lot of challenges along the way, drought, the loss of a lot of alternatives to the biomass plants, many of which have been shut down over the years. Our historical average in the last couple of years before the board's June 2021 action on this was about 500,000 tons, 500,000 to 600,000 tons per year. Last year, it went down to about 100,000 tons. So it used to be well over 1 million. Right before the phase out was somewhere around 500,000 to 600,000 tons of woody material being burned. Now it's down to about 100,000 tons per year and continues to get even lower as we implement the final parts of the phase out. There's a lot of funding available in the program that supports the transition. We were able to secure $180 million about a year and a half ago from the state to directly fund growers in offsetting the cost of some of these newer alternatives. There's still a lot of money out the pocket, by the way, even with that funding. If a grower's implementing these new alternatives, there's some cost share, major cost share involved. That funding process is going really well. We still have about $50 million or so left in the program that we want to use here over the next year and a half or so to sort of finish out this transition. So we're advocating still very heavily for more funding. We're working with our state and federal partners on that. But this has been a tremendous success in terms of reducing these numbers. But I also bring up the fact that we have a major challenge with Sigma, with drought. We talked about the rain and everything. So there's been, some positive news lately on the waterfront, but definitely still a massive ongoing challenge in terms of addressing, some of these challenges that our valley is facing when it comes to water and crop mix and what happens ultimately to these various crops. One quick thing on that program, our board did update the grant program a couple of weeks ago at the board meeting to raise the amount of money provided for the smallest growers. So if you are a farmer and you have less than 100 acres of total acreage that you farm in the valley, you are eligible now for an extra $400 per acre to help you offset the cost of these different alternatives, which when you add that to the base grant level, anywhere from $600 to $1,300, depending on whether it's an orchard or vineyard, it's quite a bit of extra funding to where it takes you up to maybe 70 or 80% of the total cost of the project. So it starts becoming a lot more feasible for the smallest growers to get those services onto their their fields. Actually, sometimes they have a hard time even competing for some of these resources in terms of the chipping and grinding services. So we hope with that we see an even greater uptick in our program, by the smallest farmers. The last thing I'll just note on that is that there are deadlines that are coming up by the end of this year. It's all available on our webpage. I won't go through all the details, but there are some vineyard deadlines. The acreages keep getting smaller as to who's being phased out in terms of their ability to burn. It's getting down to pretty small numbers. So there's a deadline at the end of this year, and then there is the final deadlines that are at the end of next year. So if you have any questions about that, it's all available on our website, and we're happy to go over that in more detail with you. Maybe offline or here during the meeting. Be happy to answer questions on that. The only other thing I would add, Mr. Chair and CAC members, is that with the Inflation Reduction Act funding and the other funding packages, that's really the big one right now. There's a lot of activity going on with respect to solicitations that are opening up across a variety of categories. Everything from port related to agriculture to rail, EPA. There's truck funding. There's other passenger vehicle funding. So we have staff here who are trying to follow these things very closely, weigh in early to try to provide good feedback as to how to run these programs, given our experiences here in the region, but then also support basically the valley as a whole, whether we apply directly for something or whether the city or a county or maybe an NGO or whoever it might be is looking at taking advantage of these funds. We want to be helpful in that process. As a regional agency, we have a lot of experience in trying to support those efforts. So this is something you'll be hearing more and more about as some of these different funding opportunities open up. And if you do have any needs, whether it's a letter of support or need some technical assistance to maybe look at an issue and look at it from an air quality perspective, we're happy to provide that role. So I just want to offer that as well as you think about putting these different packages together, and whether you represent, again, public government, environmental organizations, agriculture, whoever it might be. There's a lot of funding available that I hope everybody's paying attention to, and we're going to continually kind of update you on as we see some of those things play out here over the next. It's actually about 4 or 5 years worth of funding, but we're kind of in the early phase of that right now. And with that last update, that's all I have, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody may have.
Okay, great. Thank you very, very much. Appreciate it. At this time, let's go to the north. CAC members, any questions of Samir on what he has presented before you or items? He will be around throughout the portion of the morning going through some other items. So, but any questions in the north?
Yeah, man, it's Chris. Samir, thanks for can you hear us okay, or no?
No, we can't hear you. Very, you're real slight. Do we have?
We're working on the volume on our side to see if we can just raise the volume. Thanks, Chris. A little faint though.
Okay. I can yell, but it might offend people in this office.
Yeah, if you yelled, I could come off when it does come on. It could scare all of us.
Yeah.
So, but no, but go ahead. Do your best. Please go ahead.
Samir, on the Inflation Reduction Act funding, I know it's very early in the process, but has the district mapped out any specific areas of funding that you intend to target, or is it still too early in the process for you?
Yeah, a great question, Chris. There are some early opportunities here that we're looking at. Some of them are more directly, I would say, connected to what we do, and maybe things that we directly go after. Some of them are more of just how do we support local entities and going after the funds. So there's quite a bit of port-related funding, for example. So if there's anything that we could do with either the Port of Stockton or also just from inland port concepts or connectivity to the coastal ports, and making sure that those funds provide benefit beyond just right around the ports or at those ports. So that's something that we've been looking at and wondering if there's a way to leverage. So we're actually in communication with different entities and seeing if we can provide some kind of a lift of that. On the EPA side of things, there are some funds that are starting to materialize. So I'm not sure if you followed just recently, there was the climate pollution reduction planning grants that just opened up. There are 2 metropolitan statistical areas in the valley that qualify for that funding, Fresno and Bakersfield. EPA came up with an interesting kind of formula-based allocation where every state gets funding, and then every metropolitan statistical area, the top 67 in the country also are eligible, and they have a list of who those are, and those two happen to be the ones that were in that top 67 list. So there's interest, I think, in looking at how do we take advantage of those funds, because the way that the program works is if the $5 billion or so that are tied to that same program in actual emission reduction projects are directly related to who and what is included in the plans that are submitted under this first round of planning grants. So we have to be very cautious with making sure that, we're looking at this upfront. Otherwise, you may not be able to access some of those other funds. So that's another example that just opened up recently that we're taking a look at and hoping that we can support those efforts. Again, we're not necessarily a lead applicant, although I think we may be able to be one if the MSAs are supportive of that. So we're going to be engaging, with them on that as well. There's quite a bit of funding for rail that we're curious to see. There's the CRISI program and other programs, if there's ways to modernize locomotives in that effort. There's electric vehicle infrastructure funding. There's about $400 million that California was awarded under the first round of funding that we're trying to see if we can position the Valley to be large recipients of that funding. And the last piece I'll say is that there's around $5 billion of funding in the IRA package towards what's called sustainable agriculture that I think, and that's still not defined exactly as to how that works, but basically it's going to be plus up funding for a lot of the existing programs is my understanding of how that would work. And so if we have an ability as a region to take advantage of that, to deal with different issues like the ag burn transition, the modernization of fleets, everything from tractors to trucks or whatever it might be, any carbon sequestration type efforts. It's climate funding, but it has co-beneficial priorities as well on the air quality side. That's something that's also really interesting to pay attention to. Those are some of the early opportunities that we've seen. There's going to be a lot more as I think this plays out.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that. And I like the idea of coming back to this group on some regular cadences that develop so that we're informed and can help inform our constituencies as to the opportunities. And even so far as to have the CAC recommend priorities for some of those co-support or co-funding opportunities, Samir. So that would be my request going forward. Maybe you guys come back with a cadence back to this group that makes sense. I don't have a strong suggestion right now, but maybe it's every couple of months until we see what's.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chris, very much. And you may, those of you in the north, until they get the thing fixed, raise your volume just a little bit without scaring anybody. But we'll make it happen. All right. Any other CAC member in the north? Any questions of Samir? Okay. Let's go to the south. Mr. Clark, you and your folks, any questions of Samir? I think we're good. Let's bring it back here to the central. Yes, please. Oh.
Excuse me. South, John Sanders.
Oh, please, go ahead.
On the EPA funding, is there paperwork that is, or when can we expect some of the details?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I think what I'll do is, as an action item on that one, is send out the announcements that came out a couple of days ago. I want to say it was actually earlier this week that the EPA finally issued their solicitation and with some other like related documents to it. So I'll make sure the CSC gets that copy. A little bit more detail. So the way it works is, because it's very interesting, it's very different, I think, from a typical funding solicitation. Each of these two eligible MSAs, so the Fresno MSA and the Bakersfield MSA, have to express intent in applying for the funds by, I want to say it's late April. And then subsequent to that, there's actually an application that needs to be submitted. So there's a little bit of time, but not a whole lot of time. And so that has to be some kind of coalition ultimately of, whoever's sort of interested within the MSA and banding together to put together this planning grant. At the end of the day, though, and we're still trying to unpack it, quite a bit of information, but at the end of the day, ultimately, it's the mayor of the biggest city. So basically, the mayor of Fresno and the mayor of Bakersfield who ultimately have essentially the final say over, whatever concept, coalition concept is put together. And what I think I'm trying to read between the lines to what EPA is intending here, but ultimately, I think what they're looking for is, some kind of coalition within these different regional sort of, it's sort of the county is essentially the boundary for the MSA. So we'll see, that's it's very early. It's only been a couple of days. I think, John, if you had some interest in, if you wanted to give me a call to help me brainstorm, or however, we're thinking of helping at least facilitate some conversations about how to take advantage of these funds and put some ideas out there. But this is something that's going to get really interesting, I think, pretty soon here, not just in our area, but everywhere across the country who's trying to figure out, okay, how do we actually pull these coalitions together in a very small amount of time. So I'll send that out to the CAC. And John, if you have any questions after you've looked at it, please give me a call. I'm happy to walk you through it or brainstorm that with you.
Thank you, Samir.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the South, from CAC? Hearing none, we'll bring it back here to the Central, please.
Thank you. First, I just want to take a second to really thank my colleague Chris in the North in regards to the action item I think we heard about the Inflation Reduction Act. Love to be able to hear, like, every couple months, how that's going, what that means, not only for us to be advocates for our communities, but also for the board itself and what recommendations we might be able to, as that gets unpacked. I think it's going to be an interesting few years. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, and for Chris for kind of requesting that we hear about that semi-frequently. And then my other comment just had to do with the biomass program. First of all, congratulations to staff for that huge success, going from, now we're at 100,000 acres in just a few years, or 100,000
Tons.
Yeah, tons. And my question is how we're communicating that success, right? Like, there's so many times that, coming from a social scientist perspective, so many times that the Air Board is kind of getting a lot of flack from the community, and I'm just wondering if we're actually kind of being forward about the success of what that looks like, especially with the funding coming to an end and sort of wrapping that up.
That's a great question. Yeah, that's why I'm here, by the way, talking about it and hoping you guys can, and gals can be emissaries for this, because you all come from worlds where I think it's important to continue touting that success. We issued a press release following, our board meeting. Actually got some press over this. We've done that at least a couple of times this last year, working with various media partners to highlight that, so it's not just the success of the transition, but also making sure that growers are aware of the funding opportunities. Because I think no matter how hard you work on that front, we're always amazed that there may be an individual out there who just, for whatever reason, was too busy working to, fully realize that there was help that they needed to take advantage of. So we're always looking for ideas on that. If you have more specific ways that you can get it, we're happy to, for example, provide little snapshots of this information. If you can get it into your social media newsletters, I've seen interest in doing that. I've actually seen some take advantage of that offer, and so we're always looking for ways to do it. We profile it in our annual reports. We're advocating state and federal level, sharing information with congressional members, sharing information with policymakers. We have quite a wide range of things that we do to tout that success, but also the ongoing need to support this transition, because it doesn't stop in 2024, right? I mean, especially if we continue losing the last few remaining plants, which it does seem like it's sort of on the way when you look at the trends in terms of, where the energy markets are going. This need is, with the drought, with orchards being removed for a variety of reasons, it's not going anywhere. And the cost is still going to be very, very high in the absence of some funding support. So it's actually part of, in fact, when we talk about under item number 9, the proposed state budget, it's one of the priorities that we've identified there as something the CAC can actually be vocal on as far as taking a position on in the context of the budget as well. So
Maybe if I can just invite, when you send that EPA document over to all of us, if you could just send over the latest press release that went
Sure.
out, and that way we all have it in our tips of our fingertips to just kind of move forward. I think there's one sort of target audience when we talk about outreach for it, right? In regards to making sure you have enough applicants to the program, but another one when we think of like, what is your air board doing for you, right? Like that's a huge statistic in regards to success. So good work to the team. Thanks.
Okay, any other members of the central office of the CAC? All right, let's open it to the public in the north. Any questions of Samir on his presentation from the public in the north?
There are no public comments in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's move it to the south.
No public comment in the south.
Great, let's bring it back here to the central office. Any public comment?
There's no indication of any public members in the office or online.
Great, thank you. Samir, I just want to say thank you on all the effort of the working from the board side and your staff entirely on this, the funds. I do know that USDA NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, definitely is trying to be in lock with you folks on the funding. So if we get state funds, we definitely want to make sure that our federal funds are doing the same type of helping and assistance. And I do know that at the Farm Bill, at the Tulare Equipment Show on the week of the 14th through the
World Ag Expo.
the World Expo, rather than Tulare, which I used to take my students to in Tulare, yes, the best show in the world. Definitely, we presented to the Ag hearing. The Ag Committee did a presentation and a listening session to all the farmers and everything. And some of those things were brought up to the NRCS, to the budget, to the Ag Committee to increase those funds. And so I think it's great that the NRCS funds, USDA, can also be a part of that package with what you're trying to do with EPA. And even as you talk about item number 9, again, I think the coordination is so important, and appreciate all the staff work and Tom Jordan and all of his efforts with you guys and gals. So again, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I want to compliment you because you did have the opportunity to address the Ag Committee, and you represented all of us well and the community well from the standpoint of agriculture. So I thank you in that regard.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, let's go to item number 7 at this time, the update on the plans.
Hello, good morning. My name is Emily Nealand, and I'm the program manager over our air quality planning team here at the district. And I'm here today to provide you with a couple of updates. Number 1 on our regulatory efforts, and then John and I will be switching into a presentation as well. So first, for our regulatory update, we're continuing our rule development process for our leak detection and repair rules. And we plan to continue working with CARB and stakeholders and schedule a public workshop here in the coming weeks, where we'll be going over our draft amendments and soliciting public feedback on those. And we'll be continuing rule development here in the coming months, and we'll be taking amendments to our board sometime this year. Additionally, for Rule 4402, which is our rule for crude oil production sumps, we're also continuing that public process and coordinating with our stakeholders and putting together our draft amendments. We're also continuing our process for Rule 4550, which is our rule for conservation management practices, consistent with our commitments from the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, and specifically looking to evaluate opportunities for fallowed lands, as well as identify additional opportunities to promote the selection of conservation tillage as a CMP. So we're continuing that public process, and we'll be taking amendments to our board this year. And then lastly, we're also continuing our rule process for Rules 1020, 2201, and Rule 2301, which are our rules for definitions, new and modified stationary source review, or NSR, and then emission reduction credit banking. And I'll leave it there on that one, as Brian Clements, our Director of Permit Services, will be providing you with a more detailed presentation on that one later in this meeting. So with that, I'll open up for any questions on that portion before we get into our presentation, which is going to go deeper into our current planning efforts, as well as our efforts on contingency measure requirements.
Okay. What would be Do you want to continue with John's presentation, all of it, and then open it up to the board for, okay, we're gonna do that. So John, we're gonna go right into you, and then we'll come back to Emily and ask you with questions, and that way we can save time and do it more effectively. So
All right,
John,
great.
please.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm John Klassen, Director of Air Quality Science and Planning, and Emily and I are going to give you some updates here. I was here last month providing a few updates on our PM 2.5 planning efforts, and we'll give you some more updates today and give you some more specifics on contingency measure requirements and what we're planning for that. As you know, we have a lot of air quality challenges in the valley. We have a unique combination of topography and meteorology surrounded by mountain ranges. We have meteorology that places a lid over the bowl of the valley, trapping those emissions that can lead to higher concentrations of pollutants exceeding different standards that make it a challenge for us. We have major goods movement corridors, 99 and I-5, high population growth, pollution transport from other areas, and wildfires that contribute to the challenges that we have. And because of these challenges, we have to go much further than other regions. We have to get even more emissions reductions in other regions to meet the clean air targets compared to what other areas have to do. Just to give you a bit of a scope of the different levels of involvement of different agencies in air quality planning and rulemaking, at the top there is the US EPA. They provide oversight over the nation's air quality standards. They're the ones that set the national ambient air quality standards. They go through a review process to set that every so many years. Once they set a standard, then states then need to follow those requirements to implement different plans and regulations to improve air quality to meet those standards. For California, our state agency is called the California Air Resources Board, and they provide oversight over planning for the state of California. They work with local air districts like ours. And CARB has a direct jurisdiction over mobile sources of emissions like cars, trucks, off-road equipment, so they focus on regulations in that area. Here locally at the district, we focus on rules and regulations for stationary sources like processing plants, industrial facilities, some area sources like residential wood burning, and we work directly with CARB to put together these plans for our area to meet these standards. And these plans are called State Implementation Plans, or SIPs, that we work on with CARB to implement any new standard that comes out from the EPA. And through our efforts, we've reduced emissions significantly. You've seen this chart in our boardrooms. We update this every year, showing the change that we've had, specifically in NOx emissions, which is the key precursor to the formation of both PM 2.5 and ozone. And you can see how significantly this has changed over time over the past 40 plus years, where we've had over a 90% reduction in stationary source emissions, about a 75% reduction overall. And this will continue to be driven downward in the coming years as our latest plans come to fruition and those strategies are developed and implemented over time. This is a combination between what we do for stationary sources, what CARB does for mobile sources, and combined, it really is the nation's toughest emissions control program anywhere in the country. We couple that with our strong incentive program. We have a number of programs that we update you on a regular basis. Over the time period, we've spent over $4.5 billion through both public and private investment into these programs. And because of this, we continue to see improving air quality. And just to give you a scope of what has changed here over time, if you haven't seen this before, these are a couple of charts here showing the change in PM 2.5 across the valley. On the left-hand side, this is the change in our 24-hour design value, so our daily average air quality for PM 2.5. Going back about 20 years, you can see all those areas of red and orange, higher concentrations, and then you see as you progress forward in time how much cleaner it's getting and then where we're expected to go in the coming years. Same for the right-hand side. This is an average over the entire year, an annual average. You can see even more red and orange areas in the past, and you can see that progressively getting better over time compared to where we used to be. Same for ozone as well. Looking back a 20-year period here from the year 2000 to 2020, you can see back 20 years ago how high our ozone concentrations used to be across the region, and because of our strategies reducing NOx and VOC, we've seen a big change in ozone as well, where we are much better now than we used to be, and we continue to progress forward and march forward to meet those air quality standards. I won't read all the details in this table here, but this just reflects a lot of the actions that our governing board has taken over the past few years to implement some strategies that we have in our plans for PM 2.5. You can see a number of things have happened there in the past few years. On the right-hand side, you see that the action date for different industrial sources, area sources, phasing out open ag burning that we've talked about a bit this morning already. Then below at the bottom part there, you see some highlighted rows of ongoing rule development that we're working on now for CMPs, potential amendments there, and different VOC rules for oil and gas that we're looking at. Just an example of how far we've come for some of these source categories. Like I mentioned, we've had to go further than anybody else to reduce emissions. This just gives you a scope of industrial boilers of how far emissions have been reduced already. So if you look on the left-hand side and you kind of work from left to right, you can see these different time periods, different regulations that have come into place, lowering the emissions limits as different control technology comes into play that's available. You can see that we've already seen about a 98% reduction in emissions from this category compared to uncontrolled. So there isn't a whole lot left for this category or other types of categories like this to get even more emissions reductions. So much has already changed over these time periods. And just I'll end on this one and give it to Emily in a second, but our latest PM 2.5 planning effort, this was within our 2018 PM 2.5 plan, which was adopted by our governing board and CARB, and this addresses the three current PM 2.5 air quality standards, the 97, the 2006, and the 2012. This included a number of new rules for stationary and mobile sources and incentive-based measures, clean technology investments, and through this effort, we've already taken action on a number of these rules and regulations addressing the sources to continue to drive down emissions. And we did make a revision to this plan in October of 2021 to address the 1997 standard. So at this point, I'll hand it over to Emily to give us some more background on where we are with our planning actions for contingency.
Perfect. Thanks, John. And hello again. So specifically on the PM 2.5 planning efforts, EPA has taken action in the Federal Register to approve some key portions of the plan. However, there are some significant actions that are still pending and remain with EPA. Some of the recent approvals include the serious plan for the 2006 standard, the moderate plan for the 2012 standard, both of those except for contingency measures, which we'll get into here in a moment. They've also found that we've attained the 1997 24-hour standard, and they've also approved a number of new regulations, which includes the ag burn phase-out that Samir just touched on, the residential wood burning strategy, among other strategies. So as many of you know, the EPA's disapproval or inaction on our plans or regulations can result in devastating consequences to public health and the economy. This results in Clean Air Act penalties and sanctions, which can include the loss of transportation funds, which is billions of dollars and thousands of jobs lost, loss of local control, as well as other permitting barriers. This leads to regulatory uncertainty, inefficiencies, and confusion, as well as inequity in addressing air quality and public health challenges, given the significance of federal mobile sources, as John just went over, and their emissions contribution to the Valley. And this specifically has led to sanctions clocks and federal implementation clocks, which are still are currently running for the Valley for contingency measures, as well as other plan elements, which have 18-month and 24-month clocks attached to them. So we'll get into that here in a moment. So contingency measures are extremely difficult in light of recent court rulings that have challenged EPA's interpretations of the requirements. The first issue is that the Valley is non-attainment for multiple national ambient air quality standards. So not only do we have to develop contingency measures for one standard, we have to create multiple contingency measures for every standard that we're non-attainment for. We're already implementing the most stringent control measures feasible. We're leading the nation in all of our regulations and the stringency. So it's really difficult for us to find any opportunities that we're not already pursuing. Contingency measures also have to have an automatic implementation through what's called a contingency trigger, which is infeasible for most control technologies as they take time and planning to implement. We also have a scarcity of measures that meet the highly restrictive definition based on some of those challenges I just mentioned. And existing policy also requires that contingency measures achieve a chunk of emission reductions that we currently don't have available for many of our regulations. As I mentioned, we're already implementing the most stringent control measures feasible. So we're currently working with CARB to develop updated contingency measures in light of the sanctions clocks ahead of us. And we're looking to submit a package to EPA here in the coming months. And I will mention that while we are facing the challenges, EPA has yet to release updated contingency measure guidance, which they've said they'll be publishing draft guidance here in the near future, but we've been waiting quite some time for that guidance. We're also meeting regularly with CARB and EPA to understand the impending guidance as we're working to address our questions and put together our strategy to address the requirements. In addition to state and local measures and considerations, we're also requesting that EPA review opportunities under their control for federal mobile sources in order to provide their fair share assistance in addressing this really complex requirement. So through our analysis, we've been looking at our recent district attainment plans, which have included robust evaluations of all of our control measures. And specifically, most recently in the 2022 ozone plan, we evaluated all of our NOx and VOC rules, and in many cases demonstrated that we're going beyond the most stringent measures feasible. For the 2018 PM 2.5 plan, similarly, we evaluated all of our PM 2.5 and NOx rules, which EPA had approved as meeting the most stringent measures feasible requirements in July of 2020. And I'll note that this was upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in April of 2022. So EPA has issued, in addition, a proposed interstate transport federal implementation plan this last year, which included new national emissions limits for a variety of industrial sources, and specifically for power plants, engines, glass plants, and a couple of other sources as well. And in reviewing this, the district also found that our emission limits are significantly lower than that of what EPA is proposing in that plan. So it just further strengthens that we are going above and beyond and doing everything that we possibly can. So based on our analysis and the evidence before us, there's a scarcity of opportunities. As I've mentioned, we're going above and beyond. So there's a scarcity of measures available for us here in the Valley. And we're having extensive interagency discussions with CARB and EPA to identify opportunities. And through that discussion, we've identified a couple sources of interest for direct PM 2.5 for contingency, including residential wood burning, dust from open areas, commercial charbroiling, and a couple other categories as well. So the first that we're really dialing into is Rule 4901, which is our rule for wood burning fireplaces and wood burning heaters. And the rule was recently approved by EPA as meeting the most stringent measures feasible. However, wood smoke remains a high contributor to PM 2.5 levels here in the Valley. So we're currently evaluating opportunities for 4 separate contingency measures within the rules to establish more stringent curtailment levels upon the issuance of final determination by EPA that the Valley triggered a contingency measure requirement. And those specific triggers are, first, if we fail to make reasonable further progress toward attainment of the standard, fail to meet any quantitative milestone in an attainment plan, submit a quantitative milestone report, or lastly, attain the PM 2.5 standard by its attainment date. And I'll note that South Coast, their wood burning rule contains a similar contingency provision, which EPA fully approved in April of 2022 as meeting PM 2.5 contingency requirements. And I'll also note that our rule is more stringent from a regulatory requirement than their contingency measure. So here's just one example of something we could be looking at. So in this table, you'll see upon each contingency measure trigger, we would be looking to lower the level 1 wood burning curtailment for hotspot counties, which are the counties of Fresno, Madera, and Kern, by 1 microgram following each trigger, and then the same thing for non-hotspot counties. So everyone would drop by 1 microgram following a trigger. And we're also looking at opportunities where if a non-hotspot county were to cause a failure to attain for the entire San Joaquin Valley, they would potentially be subject to the hotspot county level 1 and 2 curtailment levels. Another source that we're looking at based on EPA comments is our open areas and fugitive dust rule. So we'll be looking to potentially lower the rural acreage applicability threshold for dust control requirements through Rule 8051, which is our open areas rule. And just to quickly note, an open area is a vacant portion of residential or commercial lots and contiguous parcels that are immediately adjacent to and owned and or operated by the same individual or entity, but this is not applicable to agricultural sources. The current requirement in the rule is for urban open areas greater than half an acre and rural open acres greater than 3 acres. If they're disturbing 1,000 square feet or greater, they must limit their opacity of dust by to no greater than 20%. So specifically for our contingency measure, we would potentially be amending the 3-acre rural applicability threshold to a lower level upon issuance by EPA that we met one of those contingency triggers that I went over on the last slide. And similarly to the last contingency measure we talked about, Imperial County has a similar provision in their contingency, in their open areas rule, and they only included a couple of the contingency triggers that are required by EPA. However, EPA still approved it in August of 2019. So with that, we anticipate returning to the governing board with our contingency submission and associated regulatory amendments in the second quarter of 2023. And we're hoping to continue developing this in coordination with CARB and EPA and in conformance with EPA contingency requirements, which we're still awaiting the updated guidance on. And once we do submit this package, we'll continue to urge EPA to take timely action to ensure that the package is approved and the rule is approved prior to the implementation of Clean Air Act sanctions. And we are looking to have a public workshop here in the coming weeks ahead of our governing board consideration. And I'll mention again that EPA's continued delay on their updated guidance poses a significant challenge for us in putting together our package to make sure that what we have is approvable. But we'll continue to have meetings with them to get their feedback on the guidance as it will likely not be published ahead of us publishing our package. And upon governing board approval, we'll be submitting the package to EPA through CARB for their evaluation and action to satisfy these Clean Air Act requirements. And with that, I'll pass it back over to John for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Just the last few points here. As we've talked about, we really need federal support to get emissions reductions to help us move forward, to continue to reduce emissions, attain these standards. There are opportunities out there for interstate trucks, locomotives, aircraft that we're pushing EPA to look at those closely. Just to illustrate the ongoing challenge here on the top right-hand side of this slide here, that orange line there on the top there represents emissions from federally regulated sources. The blue line are emissions from state regulated sources. You can see as time has gone on, the state has driven down California emissions more and more. And we get to this point where they cross over, like right now, we're at the point now where there are more emissions coming from federally regulated sources than state sources. And it becomes, you can see those two lines diverging going forward, where federally regulated sources are becoming a bigger piece of the pie of what's left over. So we're using this to continue to drive the point that we really need federal help. We need their support. We need them to be co-regulators with us and with CARB to do what they can do to reduce emissions over what they have jurisdiction over. So we'll continue to press this forward with them. And as Samir mentioned, there's some discussion earlier about the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, lots of opportunities for new funding that we'll get connected to and try to bring that funding into the Valley to help support any projects to reduce emissions going forward. Just a few other points here about other planning, things that we're working on. We've already demonstrated that we've attained a number of federal air quality standards for PM10, for 1-hour ozone, the 24-hour standard portion of the 97 PM2.5 standard. EPA has issued clean data findings. We're focusing now on a couple of other standards. We're getting very close to attaining the 97 8-hour ozone standard and the 97 annual PM2.5 standard. We're working on this closely, doing additional analysis, exceptional events we talked about last month a little bit. We're looking at that closely to bring that data and those packages to EPA for consideration. And then once we attain a standard, we have to put together what's called a maintenance plan that shows that we're continuing to be under that level going forward. And then once we submit that, there's a formal redesignation of the Valley to attainment by EPA. So there's some other actions there that we're working on related to these standards. Then finally, just a quick update on the ozone plan that we touched on at the last meeting. Just a reminder, this was adopted by our governing board in December of last year. This addresses the latest 8-hour ozone standard set by EPA in 2015. CARB adopted this in January 2023, just a couple months ago, and just last month, a few weeks ago, CARB submitted that to EPA for their review. And should EPA need any additional information as they review that, we'll be ready to provide any technical support that they might need. And we'll keep the CAC updated as the strategy for that plan is implemented over the coming years. And that's it for our presentation. So we'd be happy to hear any discussion or if you have any questions on the rules or the planning work that we're doing.
I don't know. Well, first place, thank you for the very heavy report, and definitely eye-opening. I would make one recommendation, Mr. APCO. You got a beautiful wall in the back, and I would start putting some of those great charts of the emissions for boilers and all those things. It'd be absolutely fantastic to be and continually look at what we've done for 20 years, 25 years. You've done a tremendous job. It's overwhelming, and yet the main thing is to keep people's jobs, keep our rural communities alive. Not worrying about Los Angeles or San Francisco, but I'm worrying about Woodlake and Mendota or Porterville or any of these small cities that we have in this valley, including even Bakersfield, even Fresno. But the main thing is the rural community. So thank you for a great presentation. Before I go to the board members, Samir, do you have any comment you want to make before I go to the CAC members?
No, I just wanted to express appreciation for what I think some may describe as a fire hose of Clean Air Act planning information. So we live in that world, but I know that especially for relatively new members, that's a lot of information to process. So I think as you keep thinking on this, even beyond this meeting, just again, just want to offer, feel free to reach out to me and our team's happy to keep you plugged in. I just want to thank Emily too. She's relatively new in her role, doing a great job and trying to keep this coordinated and moving forward. I appreciate her stepping up and giving a great presentation again. She also presented to our board as well and just doing a great job in leading that team.
You definitely have to stay on until we get through this. So there's no moving to other jobs or nothing. Between the two of you, you have to stay, period. Okay? Just a mandate, okay? Again, I want to open it up now to the CAC members in the north. Questions of Emily and John at this time, please.
Mr. Kuna, Chair, could I say something?
Yes, sir. We'll start with you and then we'll just go right to your right.
Okay, thank you very much. And of course, this is really for the benefit of the new members, just to share a little perspective because there's a lot that's thrown at them. And, we really need to applaud the Air District. If you take a look at any of these graphs, the criterion pollutants have come down dramatically. And so you would think there'd be a dramatic reduction in mortality and morbidity as a result of that. I'm always asking for those types of studies too. But I think we need to applaud and recognize what a great job that has happened here. And it is true, I believe that this district has amongst the most stringent rules and regulations. So it's resulted in an enormous amount of benefits. What I think you have to recognize too is it looks like we're pretty close to that PM 2.5 standard. We're at pretty close to 11 micrograms per meter cubed. If they are going to press for greater reductions, it's going to come at an enormous cost. And if you actually take a look, in my opinion, at the additional contingent measures, they are going to result in puny reductions and big costs. Now, look. You have to understand the organizational behavior here. Staff is fabulous. They can say there are sanctions here and sanctions there, and we have got to squeeze out that last, ounce of PM 2.5. But what do you think the chances are of sanctions being imposed on this district that has done such a great job and will continue to do a great job? I asked that question of council. Give me a list of all the draconian things that have happened in the real world. I'm still waiting for that list. So that doesn't mean we don't support everything that's going on here, but especially for the new folks. Think about how far we have come. Sure, we're under regulatory pressure, but look at how far we have come, and to get the additional reductions are very costly. And of course, I will claim I have not seen a double-blind randomized study or any cogent study that shows that additional reductions of 2 micrograms is going to result in any health benefit. But maybe it's out there. So thanks for listening to me.
Okay, let's go around the table in the north as we keep going. I think Chris.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear us better, by the way, so I know how loud to talk?
Yeah. Now you're normal.
Well, I'm not sure I'm ever normal, but thank you. I can actually abbreviate my comments because I agree with a lot of what Mr. Leba just said. Really, what I want to do is just philosophize for just a moment and talk about what I think CAC should do. So at the end of the day, staff did a great job presenting a lot of information and identifying the reductions as articulated, and that where we are now is we're not even in the 90-10 5, we're in the 97-3 category in terms of benefit. So we are not going to achieve, and I think this is important just to say bluntly, we are not going to achieve the federal standards by district actions alone. I think staff did a nice job articulating that, and sometimes I think we bury that lead when we talk about it, because at the end of the day, without the federal government stepping in on transportation related emissions, it won't really matter what the district does. It won't matter what CARB does. Well, CARB does from a transportation standpoint, but any stationary source control will matter not at all. And I want to, and this gets to a little bit about what the chair spoke about a minute ago about putting things up on the walls. I think the district does a good job with that. I would like to see CAC take a stronger and more aggressive stance on that statement that we are not going to achieve the federal standards by district actions alone. And it gets said, but it often gets lost because people look at the district as it is the solution to the problems. And at the end of the day, it's not. It is not going to solve it's not going to allow us to achieve the federal standards at all. So I guess, Mr. Chair, and maybe for the CAC members, I would like to maybe state three things. That one, we continue to press the point, both from the board level and the CAC with the necessary agencies, which I know we do, but I want to be more aggressive on that front. I would like to see CAC have a very clear articulated position around this, that is basically an elevator speech as to why we feel the way we feel, assuming there is unanimity within the CAC about what I said. And then lastly is how do we continue to help the board from a CAC perspective articulate that point? Because we're just simply not going to, anything that the staff does or district does at this point is not going to materially help us achieve the federal standards. It's just simply not. And I just hate to see that get buried. So that's all, Mr. Chair, and happy to have others weigh in.
Great. Thank you very much, Chris and Mr. Lieber both. Any other board member in the north? Yes, sir, please.
I agree with two comments just to my left. One of the things that we always look at is what's existing today. In the future, you're going to have different fuels. What if we expedite getting some of the other fuels that are coming on in? Like aviation fuel is supposed to be totally sustainable, but bio-aviation fuel by 2050. Why don't we push that with diesel, biodiesel, which I know by 2025 will be 40% in my area. But why don't we start pushing the biodiesel, which, although it is still a pollutant, not as great as petroleum-based. We're addressing exactly what's existing today. Let's push what we can exist, what we can move forward in the future. Because biofuels, although pollutant, is a lot less than the petroleum-based. And that can be for your stationary and also your mobile sources. And it may even extend some of your trucks that you're taking off the line or restricting in hours by increasing their efficiencies with biofuels than regular diesel.
Thank you very much. Any other CAC member in the north? Questions of the staff or Samir? Okay, let's go south. In the south, CAC members, questions of Emily and John and Samir at this time.
John Sanders.
Please go ahead.
I have a couple of comments. When we talk about okay, when we talk about biodiesel, like what was just spoke of, there's some things that biodiesel does not allow engines per se to do the same thing they do with other diesel. And why it's still coming out, I still think the motors and the people who develop the fuels need to work together to keep the same outcome of torque, power, whatnot, to go get the fossil fuels that we use for tires, watch bands, shoes, chairs, whatever. So that's a great idea. We just have to get the folks who build the motors to get on board and work in that. And I think it's something that, knowing what I know from people I've talked to, that they would do. Also, we do have the issue with the federal not letting us bring our ratios down, the federal air board. We really have to lay into them on that and find a way to make that a public presentation, so that our county, who is suffering the most in one way financially by converting everything and doing everything, it costs us money, but our health is better as well. Personally, my health is better as well. I would hate to see sanctions, though, in our area after everything we've done. And then the last question I have is, there's an organization called Truckers, and my question about this organization is, who do they answer to? Because they have a set of rules that's different than DMV rules. It's different from other rules. And if someone has that answer, I know it's not 100% on this line of questioning, but I'd sure like to know who makes their rules and why we can't get all the rules the same with the DMV, truckers, CARB, whatever else. That's all.
Thank you very much. And just for the clarification, I believe you're referring to truckers is under the ARB bus and truck rule. And truckers is a component of ARB's enforcement side to check on the various registrations, et cetera. Then they turn that over to DMV. And DMV is the one now issues the permit or your registration if you have met the standard, the rule. And the bus and truck rule, truckers is and the staff can do a better job than me, but I do know that I deal with ARB truckers staff tremendously a lot on the new requirements for the 20 or tier 3 engines that have to be outlawed. They were outlawed as of January 1, unless they fell into the 1,000 miles per year. So that is definitely a discussion item that we all need to have. And I think maybe from the standpoint of what you're asking, I think is important to who really is in charge of the bus and truck rule from the standpoint of ARB as a state agency that oversees and gets its authority from EPA. And so maybe we can have that continual discussion, but I believe you're referring to truckers as the part that's in ARB, I believe. And John or Emily, you folks can, or even Shiraz or even Samir can talk to that as well. But let me continue on. Any more comments from the CAC in the South? Les or anybody?
Microphone on there. Just a couple comments. I've been through these FIP wars before, and to say this is going to, overly influence a lot of the people that are in the industry trying to stay in business, it's not. And that's a mixed emotion. Some it will be real concerned about it, but other ones, for example, the people I represent, they're not gonna be overly concerned about it. FIP has always been a tool that EPA's used. And in the past, we've actually said we're at an impasse with EPA. So EPA, you take over and decide what's gonna happen. They don't wanna do that. They want you guys to do all the work for them. And I've been tracking this since 78, 77. So I'm just giving you some upfront advice. Don't take that to being the end all to end all for you guys. The other part of that, a contingency measure, just be real truthful. A contingency measure is a proposed rule. It's not contingency. Once it's identified and you're in a non-attainment area, that is going to be the rule. So, I mean, to say that we're just, dancing around the edge, you're not. You've identified a rule through the contingency thought process. So those are some of the couple things that I would throw out there for you. I know you've got a tough chore ahead of you, but there's a lot of folks that are behind you too and wanting to work this process through this process. We've met the challenges before on whether it's a SIP or whatever. So there you go. That's my comments, Manny.
Thank you very much, Les. Any other comments from any CAC member? If not, I will bring it back here to the Central and to the CAC members. Comments of the staff and Samir.
I thought I saw Samir.
Samir.
No, I was waiting for all the comments first. I was going to
Okay.
respond and offer some suggestions too, but I don't want to get ahead of any other
if-
member comments.
After your comments, if any of you CAC members still have some questions after Samir responds or the staff, just throw something at me here in the central office. You can't do that through the high-tech world, but that's okay. Just jump up and down or throw your chair or something so I can see you. So Samir, go for it, please.
Just real quick, I appreciate all the comments. They're very complex and very concerning, very confusing, I think also. So appreciate all the feedback. Just a couple of quick things. I think Chris, Mr. Savage, had a suggestion that I think we definitely want to be supportive of, to the extent the CAC wants to take a position on where this issue is heading, but also if there's like a larger issue there in the context of our state implementation plans. But I think our intent, just reading the comments here and also just looking at our us needing to move forward with we do owe EPA a contingency package, by the way, and so our our general tradition, part of why we've been able to avoid these things in the past is because we continually make sure whenever we owe something, we provide something too, and then we're able to work on these issues, and we don't just ignore things that may be required by say a disapproval, or in this case actually disapproval of our contingency. We actually owe an updated package, so that is the intent. Now, what's in that package and related to scarcity of measures, as Emily talked about, because we have all these tough rules, the content of it, that's what we were trying to share today in terms of what some of the issues are, and I think I think a lot of what was stated is at least partially addressed with what we were laying out as the rationale behind the package that we're working on right now. But to Chris's suggestion, I think the intent would be to come back to the CAC in April. This is more of a discussion and an update today. There was no action being recommended, on any of these issues. But I think in April, leading into, say, going into our board with a package for them to consider, which may include, so that those two measures or combination of those that Emily had talked about, one for residential wood burning, the several measures there, and then maybe something on the fugitive dust, along with the scarcity arguments and all the other demonstrations that would be part of that. If the CAC wanted to take a position on that along the lines of what Chris was suggesting, and if that also touched on some of the other, if it was broader than maybe just that contingency, that would be an opportunity there, I think, to help formulate. And we'd be happy to support that, but that would be an action item potentially on the April agenda to help move that along. I do want to note on the sanctions side, there were a couple of comments raised around, these sanctions never happened, they're not real, something along those lines. Um, I don't mean to paraphrase too much, but sort of the essence of what I took away from some of the comments. The issue here is this: there are clocks that are running. The federal implementation plan, EPA does have an intention. They're under. This is where you get into the weeds a bit more on this. By the end of July, they are under a clock to either issue a federal implementation plan, a proposed federal implementation plan, or approve the underlying deficiencies. So if we were to get them a package, if they were to approve that package, they wouldn't have to issue a federal implementation plan. Time is very short here, so in all likelihood, there's a federal implementation plan, that would be in the works. That's happened, basically right now. And then by the end of the year, this is the clock that I think, well, there's two real clocks that are right in front of us. One is the permitting sanctions clock that is this summer in June. If they do not approve again, address the underlying deficiency, which is for contingency. There's a permitting sanctions clock, that's the 18-month clock, and there's a highway sanctions clock that's by the end of this year. And the only way that you can stop that clock, and the highway sanctions clock, by the way, that would mean that all the Valley 8 counties would lose a big portion of their federal highway transportation funds. As you know, there's a lot of funding that comes to the Valley for a variety of projects. There are some exempt projects like safety and things like that wouldn't be impacted by that. But a big chunk of the federal transportation funding would be impacted by those clocks. The only way that you can stop that clock would be with an approval of whatever package we submit that addresses the underlying deficiency. That clock is running. The sanctions are immediate. They're a function of law, and they will happen if EPA does not approve the contingency measures. I want to be very, very clear about that because it's our job to make sure we understand, what the deficiencies are, that we then work with our partners, through this process, through our board, through stakeholder engagement, to ultimately submit something that is approvable by EPA. And that's, for all the challenges and reasons that Emily talked about, is very difficult. If there was just an obvious thing that we could do, if the guidance was clear, if there was an obvious deficiency, we would just obviously, address that and submit it, right? In this particular case with contingency, the issue is there is no updated federal guidance. So we're trying to, figure this out. There aren't a lot of measures or any really, these measures that we talked about, I agree with some of the comments raised, are going to be very small in their relative contributions. And, so there's a scarcity of measures, as we call it, lack of guidance, and all of it in a very short amount of time because the sanctions clocks are running. So there isn't, they are in place. Like there's nothing that would prevent those clocks from running and expiring by the end of this year. So it's a very difficult situation. We're trying to paint that picture for the CAC so you understand the importance, in our opinion, of submitting something to EPA so the ball is in their court. They have the scarcity arguments. They have the measures, whatever few we're able to come up with here to show contribution to that. But, and I agree with all the comments that were raised, what Chris said, what Mr. Liba said, what Les said, at the end of the day, we do have to show, and we are able to show that, we are doing what we can basically at the local level. And then what do we do with these new funds or whatever on the federal side? We do need some help to be able to navigate our way through these standards. And my hope would be that these sanctions don't get imposed by the end of the year because we submit something that has all the necessary information that shows that we're doing what we need to do here locally, and that EPA maybe comes in with a really nice investment through IRA funds or whatever to show that they're at the table with us on this, and then we can move forward as we have in the past. And I agree with Les. When we face a situation, we have been able to resolve it because at the end of the day, we put together some kind of package of something with Carbon EPA that ultimately resolved the underlying issue. And it's our job, I think, to make sure we keep you in the loop and that we recommend what we think will ultimately get us to that place. And that's kind of sort of my summary of kind of trying to respond and be, see if we can work with the comments that were raised. I think April would be a great place for the CAC to consider some positions on this. And, we can bring you an update on where we are with the package, and then also maybe have some ideas to share based on today's discussion on a recommendation for the CAC to consider at that point.
For the
Thank
chair,
you very much.
Do you mind if I comment quickly?
Please, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Samir, thank you for the response. And just to clarify what my statements earlier, I agree with you completely. You have to submit your plan. You have no choice. I'm not in any way proposing we don't do that. What I'm really proposing is there is a North Star comment from the CAC that can be leveraged and utilized in appropriate forums that support, you know, the philosophy that I articulated. You 100% need to submit your plans. You 100% need to be looking at all possible options. I just want CAC to have a better North Star than I think we have on this point now. And I'm fully aligned that what I think should happen is the chair, along with staff, draft a comment or a statement for us that can be reviewed at the April meeting. And that is the right path forward. So I'm alignment with what you said.
Mr. Chair, but can I just a quick thing also?
Please, go ahead.
Thank you, Chris, for that, and definitely we'll be working closely with the CAC. I think in that April meeting that and ahead of it to help you know, basically and hopefully there's consensus on that, and I'll look to the chair for, you know, for guidance on that as well, kind of leading into that meeting. One quick other thing I forgot to mention on the way contingency triggers work. You know, there was a question around the you know, when you adopt a contingency rule, you know, is it automatically in place or it's already in place versus the trigger concept? So the way it works, I want to be very clear about this, is what EPA expects is for, you know, because of the court rulings and all the latest interpretations, is you do have to adopt a rule. So for example, for residential wood burning, it would be us amending our rule. That rule would have triggers in it, and those requirements would not be in effect until if and when EPA issues a finding that actually triggers those requirements. So yes, there would be a rule, and I think that was correct. I think there was a statement made about that, but the rule would not be in effect though, but for an actual trigger from EPA. So there's nothing like, so it's automatic in that you have to have the rule in place that would require whatever it requires, but it actually wouldn't be in effect until that trigger. I just want to be very clear about the way those triggers work.
Okay, great. Thank you, Samir. Thank you, Riz. Please, go ahead.
I don't need to throw my pen here, good? Or-
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I really appreciate this direction and actually the North Star comment, right? We are not going to achieve federal standards with district efforts alone. That support letter or whatever that looks like in April, I'd really encourage all of us on the CAC to also think about the other boards that we sit on, or if there's some common language or templates so we can kind of have a ripple effect, again, with that communication standpoint. And same thing with if there's any other policy levers that we can pull or consider as far as, you know, applying positive pressure in conversations with EPA and beyond. The last bit I want to just kind of like drop a seed here, and the pun is intended, is I'm just wondering if we are talking about trees, right? So the Inflation Reduction Act has hundreds of millions of dollars for trees, whether that's small landowners and the removal of trees in regards to wildfire, if that's actually planting trees and quantifying that both in city and rural areas. So as we're continuing to, you know, just build momentum and kind of ammo around that discussion of everything that we've already done, is that part of the equation? I know that won't get us to where we need to be, but it could also appeal to the EPA in different reasons. So just putting that on the platform.
I think the short answer is yes, as far as needing to make that a part of our, I mean, it's certainly part of the board's platform and what we push for on everything from enhanced forest management to better policy on exceptional events and documentation of impacts. There's a whole range of opportunity there, but yes, that's something we definitely want to weave into our recommendations as best as we can, especially with the 2.5 impacts that we see from wildfires.
Great, thank you. Any other comments from the CAC? I think along with the concept of that tree planting, et cetera, is also, which goes back to the ag burn, of putting the chips onto the land under SGMA. SGMA having a whole different world of what does that mean to EPA, has no concept of what SGMA is. But I do believe what the board adopted and with ARB and the farmers have actually met to cover their land back with the chips so you don't have open wind-blowing activity going on. We're not a wind-blowing region, but by putting that chips back into the system, I think, again, shows EPA, and at least I would hope it would, that we're doing everything unbeknownst to some of the things that we have no real control over at the end of the day, but we are protecting those soils and those lands. And I think going back to the same thing concept that you have on the trees is I think, is some other thing, just for putting out there that you're doing a lot of different things to help address it. So, excellent. Okay, no other comments. Let me go to the public. Any comments from the public in the north?
There's no public comment in the north.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's go to the south. Any comments
No
in
public
the
comment
south?
in the south.
Okay, let's bring it back here to the central. Any public comment?
No indication of public comment in the central office or online.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Okay, Samir, I think you've got sort of guidance, and Emily and John of pulling together some great things. And the only thing I will say is that in that presentation, maybe let's see, this is February, this is March, maybe not at the March board meeting, but maybe in the April one we adopt it, we will have some great photographs in the back of the room and to the side of the room, so I just don't see gray walls, but I see a great chart that's over there, that maybe that can even be part of the whole, at the end of the day, of what you guys are doing and achieving. And I think the CAC looks forward to actually being a part of this whole thing. And I agree, any other type of boards we serve on and committees that can help educate them and have them do some great things of educating those different agencies, I think that's great. And so thank you very much, both to Emily and John. Appreciate it very much. And Samir, thank you. All right, let's go to item number 8, the California Air Resources Board comment. Who do we have from?
Mr. Chair, if I could, just real quick,
Yes.
we have an action item under item number 9. I know, I'm just looking at the clock,
Oh,
11:30.
yeah.
I just want to, you might want to check on just time
Yeah.
commitment on item number 8, just to make sure there's enough time to talk about, if you wanted to maybe switch
I'll
those,
switch,
if Carb
yeah.
was okay with it,
If
or,
everybody's okay with that, notifying both the north and the central office and the Bakersfield. We're going to flip item number 8 and 9 just due to time restraints, so we have a quorum.
and you may want to verify that with the Carb representative to see if they have
and
any
is Carb, who's the,
time issues.
Laura?
We have Ms. Carr online.
Okay, Laura, are you okay with that?
Yes, that's fine. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you for your patience. Thank you. Okay, so let's go to item number 9, which is the action item, and that is the air quality proposed budget items that this district works on with CARB and the governor's office and the legislature. So Samir, it's yours.
Thank you. Since you haven't heard from me enough this morning, I'll be covering this next item as well. So, but I prepared this PowerPoint presentation. I have 2 slides, so it will be a little bit shorter than the previous presentation, and I'll try to keep it short here as far as the presentation goes. But we thought it was important. This is something, by the way, just backing up a little bit, the CAC has taken a strong interest in the past in weighing in on the air quality priorities in the state budget process, especially over the last several years, where we've seen quite a bit of funding being made available, running big surpluses, and quite a bit of funding that the CAC actually has been really instrumental, in my opinion, in really elevating and kind of uplifting some of the priorities that we've been advocating very hard on, everything from the ag burning to the farmer program and other key programs. So we are going through that process right now at the state level of the state developing its state budget. It's been a different budget year than the past several years, where we have, as the slide indicates, had these big surpluses, a lot of money for climate, natural resource, environmental programs that have been included in the last 2 budget years. Fast forward to this year's budget, the governor issues the January 23-24 budget. It projects a $22.5 billion deficit. And actually, you've probably seen some of the recent information that has come out the last couple of weeks. The legislative office, analyst office has come out and basically said that they think the deficit may be even greater than what was included in the January proposal. It's still a big budget. It's about a $300 billion budget, but it is down 3 to 4%, which is a huge number, overall, relative to where it's been before. The January budget does include a number of what are called trigger cuts. There's delays in funding appropriations, deferrals of spending that maybe were authorized in prior years, and overall just reductions in what's included in the budget. Just as one example, I don't think it's on this slide here, but in one example, there's about $10 billion in zero emission vehicle funding that that was included in in last year's budget, I believe, but it's a multi-year set of appropriations. In this new budget, that was reduced by about $1.1 billion, so about a 10% shave to that program alone. And there's other cuts, and I'll talk a bit about that here in the next slide. Different programs. Actually, it's right here on this first slide. I take that back. So for example, the farmer program that I know this committee has been very supportive of in the past has been a big priority for our board. A lot of cost-effective reductions that we get from that farmer program in this new budget was zeroed out. So there's no new money included in the new budget. So while there were programs like the zero emission programs that were cut by, say, 10% as a whole, in the case of the farmer program, there was actually no inclusion of funding. And so it is a concerning development in the budget. It is a core program and one of the most cost-effective things that the state has identified, actually. So interestingly, the Legislative Analyst Office has found that the farmer and a couple of other programs, the Moyer and other programs, are amongst the most cost-effective programs that the state has seen funded in recent years. We're doing quite a bit of engagement right now with our Valley delegation, with key staffers on the Senate and the Assembly side with the governor's office to make sure everybody understands just how important this program and some of the other key programs are. And, our main point along the way here has been that when you're looking at a tight budget situation, as we're seeing here at the state level, that you really should be focusing on the most cost-effective programs when you're making these tough decisions about what should and shouldn't be funded. And the farmer program, for example, is one of those programs that we're seeing tremendous benefit all throughout the Valley, not just throughout the Valley, all throughout the state, on everything on the agricultural sector, but also even on some of the forest related equipment, is part of the eligibility of that program. Just put it in perspective, here in the San Joaquin Valley, we have over $300 million in application demand in that program that are sitting in our queue right now. So it's a highly oversubscribed program, tremendous support from Valley Agriculture. We've continued to enhance the program. Just recently, our board increased the incentive levels for small farming operations. So, we have a base level of around 50% or so cost share with the program. For smaller farming operations, depending on your size, you can get anywhere from 70 to 80% of your equipment costs funded under the program with the latest changes that our board made. And we're seeing tremendous response from smaller farming operations with respect to that, along with something that the chair has been instrumental in helping us create. But we actually have this a new option in the program where you can take I'll call it gently used. Sound a little bit like maybe another industry here as I talk about this option, but gently used Tier 3 tractors. We actually have an option where we can partner with between a larger grower and a smaller grower, and actually help that larger grower get into a new Tier 4 final, and then help the smaller grower get into a more gently used Tier 3, and then we scrap basically the oldest tractor at the end of that process. So there's a lot of benefit to this program. Here in the state of California, and specifically only in our region out of the state, we actually have a commitment in our plan to reduce and replace many thousands of tractors. We're the only area who actually has this federally enforceable commitment to make this happen, which has been one of the biggest arguments as to why we need the farmer program in the first place, to support that transition in the San Joaquin Valley. So there's all these really great arguments as to why it doesn't make any sense to cut this farmer program as we're basically marching forward, trying to meet our SIP obligations, trying to meet our Clean Air Act obligations, $300 million in demand, all these reasons why it's such an amazing program to support. And yet here we are facing basically a cliff in terms of the availability of funding to continue that moving forward. So in the past, the CAC has advocated, as I mentioned before, there's been letters that have been issued by the CAC. So before you today, there is an opportunity for the CAC taking action to advocate on behalf of air quality priorities, to work with us and through the chair, perhaps develop a letter similar in principle to what the CAC has issued in the past. I've taken the time here to try to facilitate this conversation by laying out what we would consider our recommendations for the CAC to consider in the context of the state budget and the funding issues that I outlined, starting with that farmer issue. Our letter, our budget request letter, consistent with our board's priorities, is asking for a restoration of funding. We're looking at $160 million is our request for that. We know there's a delegation letter, it's actually a statewide letter that's being circulated right now, that is also looking for $160 million. It's a number that I think there's been kind of general consensus around, trying to, bring that level of funding back into the state budget. It's not as high as it's been in the past, but it's still pretty high, and I think consistent with the environment that we're in, with seeing some of the budget deficit issues and all that. That it's a high number, but something that I think is worthy of recommending. Be re-included in that budget. The other priority here is a restoration of funding for the AB 617 Community Air Protection Program that was reduced in the budget from 300 to 250. So that one, I think, is something that's continually important to highlight the importance of that program. We use those funds to support a variety of incentive projects across the valley. And then lastly, again, back to that same point that was raised earlier today, we also recommend that there be more funding included for additional sustainable agriculture opportunities. That's everything from the alternatives to open burning to offsetting some of the costs that are associated with SGMA implementation, maybe some of the fallowing programs that you've probably heard about, where there's significant costs that are associated with expecting growers to perhaps fallow their fields. And here we are also asking those same growers to make sure that they maybe implement a conservation practice on that fallowed land so that they don't create perhaps a dust issue. There's costs that's associated with that on acreage that basically isn't generating any revenue, right? Because you're fallowing that land and for water reasons. So there are some other opportunities as well that we think are worthy of consideration that are in our ledge platform, that are in our budget request. The CAC may also want to consider including in an advocacy strategy for these funds. Lastly, just to close out, my recommendation would be that the CAC take a position advocating, for these priorities, to develop a letter along these lines. It would be very consistent with letters that have been issued in the last couple of years, but also have some flexibility. It's not just a letter now for this stage of the budget process, but as this plays out, we may need to issue another letter consistent with those same priorities as it works its way through committees and ends up in different parts of the legislature. So I think if there was some kind of an authority to continue that advocacy, not just in the context of that letter, but also kind of just throughout this budget process here, as long as we had that consistent direction and nothing changed, from the priorities that are established from the CAC, I think that would be useful to be able to have that ongoing direction from the CAC to be able to take advantage of that advocacy to keep pushing these points. So I'll close with that as far as, hopefully having some kind of action taken that would allow for that to happen over the next couple of months, as opposed to just this one letter that we're able to generate, with the CAC on these issues that I just outlined. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll be happy to answer questions from the CAC. Hopefully that was clear and helpful in helping the CAC take a position on these issues.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. Let me open it up in the north. Questions by the board members of Samir. And again, I'll come
Samir,
back.
just real quick, are we in jeopardy of losing any fundings that you have in reserve right now and not yet spent for this fiscal year? I believe Newsom was looking at anything not spent to be absorbed into his deficit spending.
That's a great question. So when we saw signs of the environment that we were going into this sort of deficit budget year, we worked really hard with our partner state agencies to make sure any allocated but not yet encumbered funding was quickly encumbered into contracts with us, which is, so when they're doing what's called sweeping, as we all know, I'm sure we all heard that term, where they go look is really, allocated funds that have not yet been put into legal agreements. And so we were able to actually make sure there wasn't a lot of it because, we're actually really aggressive and are able to spend our money, very expedited, I think, compared to most other agencies. So for farmer, for example, we're well ahead of the rest of the state in spending those dollars. But yeah, I've heard nothing about any of our funds being swept because of that ability to get those into contract with us.
Any other comment in from CAC in the north? Okay, let's go to the south. Comments from the south, CAC members. Hearing none or seeing any objects being thrown at me, we will continue on here now to the central office. Mr. Williams, please.
Thank you. Thanks, Samir. I guess I have to be the want to try to make some lemonade out of a little bit of sour grapes here. I've always been a real staunch supporter on the farmer program because it has been, all the years I've been here, it's been every year, it's been one of the most, like you said, the cost-effective programs. We get the most bang for the buck with that program over a lot of the other programs. I've had reservations about 617 for a long time as far as bang for the buck, actual reductions of anything. I know as I interpret it, it's really going after monitoring and watching what's going on in these areas, and also having and developing the ability to, keep people and organizations in compliance with the rules, which doesn't necessarily yield a lot of additional reductions like the farmer program does. And so my question would be simply, in that situation, rather than looking at $250 to $300 million for a program that's still in development and isn't yielding the type, unless I'm wrong, yielding the type of returns that we get from the farmers program, why wouldn't we want to reverse those numbers and put the primary money where it will do the most good, especially since we have $300 million dollars worth of program ready to go? Why wouldn't we want to go ahead and do that? We would get so much almost instantaneous bang for the buck. And then go after the 150 to go after community air protection, ask for 100 million or 150, 200 million. But I would say that the primary would be your farmer, and that's what you want to have the most money. And you have the support of federal law behind that too, in meeting what you want to do to meet federal law. So that would probably help us. But again, I'm just going for bang for the buck. I'm always listening to Ned say bang for the buck, and this is bang for the buck on actual reductions. So I would say yes, absolutely support doing a letter, but I'd like to see those numbers flipped.
Mr. Chair, could I
Please
respond just to provide a little bit more context to as the CAC considers really great point that Derek just raised. So the 250 to 300 million range, that funding is used for a smaller portion of it. It's been up to 50 million in the past, is used for implementation. That's supporting these are statewide numbers, by the way, too. So we get a smaller piece of that, but a small piece of it goes towards implementation of the program, and then the lion's share of it goes to the emission reduction programs. And so that could be, everything from what are called those community emission reduction programs that Jess has just stepped up and I think is providing me some useful information if I need to get into more of the details of it. So there's the plans themselves, and each of those plans has funding allocations for everything from trucks and locomotives to indoor air filtration. And I know Mr. Leva, who's here, has a lot of experience with some of those types of funds, but it's not just those programs too. Some of the funds are used for even ag equipment and valley-wide, we've done fueling infrastructure, school buses, and a variety of other programs. So the vast majority of the funds are used for emission reduction projects primarily in disadvantaged and low-income communities, which is a big chunk of the San Joaquin Valley. So we've never had a hard time spending those funds in that way. But they are a bit different than Moyer and Farmer in that they do get a lot of them tied to either a community emission reduction program, or they get prioritized, for things like school buses and other things that may be community priorities. Although there is quite a bit of, we've also funded quite a bit of off-road equipment and all that as well. So overall, actually, it's a very cost-effective program as well, because you get this balance of all these different types of projects, and you can do some things like indoor air filtration that are harder to do you can't actually do with other funding streams. So it has been a priority 2 years ago when the CAC last weighed in on the budget process. The two priorities that were included in that letter were Farmer and the 250 million at that time for the community air protection program. So the CAC has taken that position in the past, but the budget does include 250. So it hasn't been zeroed out. And so if the CAC wanted to prioritize and, sort of like take a position that was more focused on, say, Farmer, that's something for the CAC to consider. But I just want to make sure on your point around, how's the money used, that there's a little bit more context about the expenditure of the dollars.
Laura, please.
Back to the farmer funding. Usually we start off with a high number in the budget process.
Thank you.
And then it gets whittled down to something that we were less happy with. But so I'm just wondering, I guess I just haven't seen this before, to have the zero, and then now we're going to ask for 160 million. So how optimistic do you feel in this going forward?
Well, that's a great question first, but, I can tell you that there's already a pretty, what I would call a strong advocacy campaign to put this on the radar the governor, is, I think, is generally a supporter of the program. On the Assembly and the Senate side, we're looking for, for basically a re-inclusion or a restoration is, I think, the term that we've used. There's already a lot of advocacy going on that. Like I mentioned, I know agriculture as a coalition has already submitted a request on this. I believe the 160 million is the number that was being requested by agriculture as a whole across the state. I think it's either already, and I'll keep the CAC updated on this. There's a letter that's circulating as well across the state on both the Assembly and the Senate side to also request $160 million. So I think in the context of this budget environment, the 160 is, it's that I think that's the number that has been landed upon. It's always that balance of make sure it's high enough to not argue against yourself, but not so high that nobody can do anything with it, right? Because we can ask for $1 billion, right? And I think we could probably spend that funding as well. So that's the number that is already part of this, just the last few weeks advocacy that's going on. I just wanted to share that recommendation with the CAC. That number could be a different number if there was an interest in that, but that's just a little bit more background as to where that number is because of the way the budget process is going and being, I think, mindful of that environment.
Are you going to be testifying at any of these budget committee meetings?
We already are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other comment before
I just wanted to follow up. Thank you for asking that. That was along the lines of what I was going to ask. Was should we be at 200 million to get to 160 million? But I think you've covered that to a certain degree because a lot of that's taken place already. Is that correct?
Yeah, we do think that's a great point and it's a great question. And that's always one of the hardest parts of making these requests. Sometimes is exactly where to land that that number. The highest that it's been statewide is somewhere around 180 million, and that's with massive surplus type budgets, right? So I think the thought here, and everybody sort of working through these numbers, was do something bold, but also still very mindful of the fact that you're going from zero to some number that and of course we don't say where's the money going to come from, but it's going to mean reallocating something, because like I said, the LAO has come out and said the deficit's probably even bigger than what the governor had proposed, because there was early indications that maybe it was being too conservative and maybe some new revenues would come in and the new tax numbers would come in, and it's only going, it seems at this point, down, right? So that is the number that I think is not just our recommendation, but something that's out there already being proposed, and it is going to be money that probably has to come from other programs, I would imagine, down the line. So at this point, I think you're getting closer to, okay, what's the real number that we're looking for, and less like, okay, let's just put something out there that we can just negotiate our way down from, because I think we're already in March, and big decisions have to be made around what's going to be cut if this is going to be put back into the budget.
Great. Samir, I think in first place, absolutely a letter, I think, would be, if everybody supports that and there's a motion and a second for that. Number two is that I believe that, we spent a lot of time on 617 for our rural communities, and finally the rural communities are getting some things, some help and stuff. I believe what we just finished the fourth one of 617, and it's just like the ag burn. We were told we're going to get help because of the situation, but nobody counted on Sigma raising its head and how much it's taken from the chipping industry, from the farmers of vineyards and those things. So we're working through those processes. But I think it's important, as I look at all those charts that you guys have displayed, that everybody has done their part in doing their part to help clean up the air from the standpoint of the communities. I believe that this state owes these rural communities those opportunities to make sure they're whole as well. Because that makes that whole plan that you guys are proposing in our SIP requirements, even from being the word FIPed by the EPA, is that those funds need to be there to help them as well. Because you're right, they've been used for a variety of things from the 617 to get those communities right away addressed. The people see things are actually happening versus a bureaucratic process that nothing happens. We pass a rule, we pass a law, and we don't do anything. I think on the 617, there's been a tremendous amount of work on all sides, from the standpoint of you and ag commissioners, to the standpoint of the air district, to the standpoint of the community people that have been there. So I think that support also needs to be present of that number, whatever that number is, of the 160 for the farmer program. Yes, we have one thing that has hit us, and that is we have a deadline. The farmers have a deadline to meet 11 tons by the federal EPA by December 31st of 23. We are close, but those funds that are going to be allocated to us in June 30th, July 1, is going to make that happen. If it doesn't, there will be a rule come January 1 started by the Air Resources Board and EPA, in the sense that will mandate every farmer having to put in a Tier 3, Tier 4 tractor. Totally a destruction to the farming community, especially not caring about if they're a small farmer, medium farmer, whatever. But all the work done will have been thrown out the door. Even working with NRCS, Natural Resource Conservation Service, is our partner. And that has been a big support of the Congress. It's a state mandate, but the state is putting its mouth where it needs to be. Okay, then we will help those farmers from the federal side give money too, because the state's doing it. To throw us under the bus at the 11 o'clock hour, to throw the 617 communities under the bus at the end of the hour, when this was a big issue, to me is wrong, absolutely wrong. And it's when you tell a farmer now you got to go buy brand new tractors when the allocation isn't even there, but to tell that to even a small grower, even a larger grower, now we have to do a lot of things, cutting jobs. What happens to those lands that are already out of water, that are going under the white, under Sigma? So the whole issue becomes huge, and we only have 9 months or 8 months left for the ag piece. Is a total destruction, and I think an absolute a bad mark on this legislature and this governor for everything we've done. And I look at all those charts you guys have performed and showed today. You've done one heck of a job of cleaning up and going after what Mr. Lieber has always said. The health impacts are important, and we are getting there, and we've done a heck of a job. So I would absolutely propose that we do a letter. Somebody can make the motion.
And Mr. Chair, just real quick, the last letters that have been submitted have been signed by the chairs of each of the individual interest groups as well. Just should have mentioned that as clarification too. The 3 different groups have traditionally put their so that draft could get routed by the chairs as a part perhaps of the action that's taken by the CAC.
And maybe we can try to coordinate something with the EJAG communities as well, of what program we have been working. But I think absolutely what you have there with the three groups, I think would be perfect to sign it from all the 3, not just me, but from each area. And then the chair being, okay, fine, I'm not into that, but if it's all the groups, I'm absolutely fantastic with it. But I think we should go what we've asked for and not, excuse the expression, let them throw us under the bus that has snow chains on it, No, I just think that we've worked too hard for all of these groups, and everybody's doing their part. And the farming industry is under tremendous amount of pressure from all standpoints. Like I told you, the bees had heaters on their backs yesterday, trying to fly around to the trees and pollinate. They were upset because, but I just think we need to do this. So I apologize for the dissertation, but whatever the CAC members want to do in the north, the south, or the central, I'm open for whatever you folks want to do. But I think we should absolutely go after what we need to protect our communities and not throw us under the bus and let other things that just whatever. So Samir,
Mr. Chair, just one other quick thing, just another suggestion. There currently isn't a chair of the city interest group. So again, if the CAC were to consider taking a position with direction, including a letter, 2 years ago, it was Richard O'Brien who was, I think, delegated to be able to sign that letter, but it could be any other member. But I think as a longstanding member of the CAC, I think there was this general support for that. So just wanted to note that as well, that just since there is no chair, just want to make sure the CAC is comfortable with handling that. And I think within the city group, obviously that could be resolved, but that was who signed it a couple years ago.
it's up to the wishes of the board members and of all three areas to move forward. I know we're getting really close on the time, but this is so important, and we just can't go backwards. We just can't. And we shouldn't throw the EJAG people under the bus either in the communities that you have worked so hard, and everybody has, of trying to help these people in these communities. So I'll stop. What is your wishes, please, from the CAC members? A motion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
Chris
please,
from the
Chris.
North.
Yes.
Just to kind of get us to conclusion here, I would be happy to move that we draft the letter as articulated by Samir in support of the funding, and that to the extent possible, it be signed by each of the chairs of the interest groups. In the absence of someone not being available, we go with the majority that are available to sign.
Okay, there's been a second. Any discussion from the maker of the motion, or let me go now to any of the members of the CAC. Any questions? Hearing none or seeing none. Let's go to the public, because we'll have to have the public. Is there any? Yeah, they have to have you gotta go to the public, or I'm gonna get in trouble. I don't need to get in trouble anymore. So.
Any members of public in the South?
No members of the public in the South.
Thank you.
In the North?
No public
North?
comment in the North.
Thank you.
Okay, bring it here to the Central.
No public comments in office or online.
Okay, so then we have a motion, and can we repeat the motion if you're able to have that? If not, I'll have Chris do it. You got it?
Mr. Savage, could you repeat the motion?
I move that the CAC draft a letter to the state in support of the funding as requested by staff, and that letter be signed by the chairs of the three interest groups. Where one interest group may not have a chair, if there's no one possible to sign, we go with the majority of the interest groups available to sign, and also with the chair of the CAC itself.
Okay, and we have a second. Okay, all right. Roll, please.
Okay, Mr. Cunha?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Harrell?
Yes.
Ms. Lopes?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hofstall?
Yes.
Mr. Savage?
Yes.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Ms. Austin Tibbetts?
Yes.
Mr. Sanders?
Yes.
Ms. Dyer?
Yes.
Mr. Liba?
Yes.
Ms. Agers?
Yes.
Ms. Fast?
Yes.
Mr. Cryer?
Yes.
Ms. Morrow?
Yes.
Mr. Ward?
Yes.
Mr. O'Brien?
Yes.
Mr. Maderos?
Yes.
Through the chair, motion passes.
Great. Thank you all very, very much. Samir, thank you, and Tom Jordan, and everybody else, as well as the board. Yes, please.
Samir, would it be possible for the city members to have a phone call between them after this meeting at some point? And if they were to elect a chair, that chair could reach out to you and let you know that they've been elected by their group and be able to sign that?
Yeah, I think that's always possible. So yeah, if we have a chair by the time the letter, needs to be, if it's basically done and all that, yeah, great. That'd be great, actually. But if not, if that hasn't happened by then I think Chris's motion and action taken by the CAC would still allow us to move forward.
Okay, great. Thank you again. Let's go to item number 8, ARB. Thank you, Laura, very much for your patience. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is Laura, Public Specialist at the California Air Resources Board in our Air Quality Planning and Science Division. I have a very brief update on the February 2020 hearing. There were just 2 items I wanted to discuss here. So the first is that the adopted another of the 70 brilliant
Laura,
Yes.
Laura, we are having a very bad voice connection where it's rambling all together. I don't know if it's on your end or our end. Try it again, please.
Sure. Is it better now?
No, it's got an echo chamber, sounds like. Go ahead again. Let's try one. Pardon?
We can just go by this.
Okay. Okay, maybe, Laura, what we'll do is it's in the packet of the presentation, and I will ask each side if they have any questions on your presentation, and we can ask it at that time, if that's okay with you. Oh. Okay, well, let me just go ahead and move forward. Is there any questions in the north of the CAC of the ARB's presentation that's in your packet? Item number 8. Okay, hearing none, let me go to the south. Any questions of the south?
Wait, where's the packet?
It's just this 2 pages.
Oh, the 2 pages.
Yeah, 2 page. You got it right there. Yeah.
It's just this 2 pages.
Yeah, it's in blue, sort of large print, and then let me. Any comments of questions of ARB from the south of the CAC? Okay, let me bring it here to the central office. Any questions of any of the folks here in the central office of the CAC? Okay, let's go to the public in the north. Any comments of Laura on what is in the packet? Item number 8. Okay, I hear none. Let's bring it to the south. Any questions?
No public comment.
Okay, great. Thank you. Bring it here to the central.
There are no members of the public in the central office and no indication online.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, Laura.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, please.
Hi, Laura. This is Laura. I had one question about the omnibus rule. Is that predominantly focused on the buses? Am I getting that right?
Hi, okay, can you hear me now? Is it clear still?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Yeah, go ahead.
That sounds better? Okay. Okay, so can I just clarify, are you asking a question about one of the workshops that's listed? This is not a question about one of the 2 items that.
No, we lost you. It's not coming through at all. It starts and then it just muddles itself.
Could I make a suggestion, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair, on this
please.
one? There is a notice that went out, and if Laura could make sure the CAC, through our clerk here, can get that out. I think there's a little bit more information in the notice about this upcoming, actually, it just had, what's today? So that was, that was a few days ago. But there is I think there's a notice with some kind of information around this. we can understand you, Laura. Sorry, I think there's still an issue with your mic, but it isn't just about buses. I'm pretty sure
All about all of it.
it's more to do with carbs, truck package, and how that compares with the new federal truck reg, the national reg that was just adopted by EPA. And that relates actually, I think, primarily to heavy duty trucks is sort of the core issue, the comparison between the state's rule and the federal rule. And I'll stop there. I think that's the extent of my knowledge on that. But there is more information posted that I think we can get to you on that.
Yeah, maybe Samir, what you could do with Todd and his folks,
Yeah.
as maybe if there's anything that we can send out to our CAC members on what the federal thing piece was and what Laura was trying to answer to, I think that would help. And then if there's something that we need to bring back in our April meeting, we absolutely can do that and make sure our systems are working with ARB and us. Okay, all right, we've done the public and everything, correct? Okay, let's go to item number 10. If I'm not mistaken, the district's NRC, ERC banking rule. And so Brian, man, your floor.
I think we're officially in the afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'll be brief with consideration of the time here, providing an update on Rule 2201, which applies to new and modified stationary sources, and our Rule 2301, which is our emission reduction credit rule. I was here last month providing an update on these rules, provided a little more detail on the need to amend these rules and the primary changes. So with this update, I'll focus on the process and what's changed since a month ago. There are a few items to update the committee on. One is we posted draft versions of the rules on our website. These are strikeout underline versions of the rules and can be found on the district's webpage under public participation and then workshops and hearings. We held a public workshop on February 15th last month to present the amendments and provide for public an opportunity for comments and feedback. That was the third workshop in the series of workshops, along with a public scoping meeting that goes back about a year now. At that same location, by the way, on the webpage, anyone can also access the presentation that we presented at the workshop a couple of weeks ago. We asked for comments on the rules to be provided to us within a couple of weeks of that, so that's in the past now. We have received a few comments, generally supportive of the amendments. There's been a few questions and recommendations that we'll evaluate and address in our responses to that. And then as far as next steps go, we plan to, the planned publication of the rule package is March 21st, a couple weeks from now, which is for a governing board public hearing the following month in April. So that's the update I have, and pass it back to the chair for discussion.
Thank you very much, Brian. Let me go to the north. Comments from the CAC members. They can hear us, right? Okay. All right. Then let me go to the south. Any comments from the south, CAC? All right, let me bring it back here to the central. Any of the CAC members' questions on Brian on this ERC issue? ESR. Okay. Let's go to the public in the north.
No public comment in the north.
Great, thank you. Let's go to the south.
No public comment in the south.
Great, thank you. Let's bring it here to the central.
No indication of public comment in the central location or online.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, thank you very much, Brian. Now let's go to item number 11, 617 of the different activities that have been going on. And so, Jessica?
Yes,
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Jessica Olson. I'm the Director of Community Strategies and Resources, overseeing the AB 617 program. Last time, and usually I give a verbal update, I did say I'd come with some slides with some background. Given short of a time, we did send out some information last time about the selection process, some background. There's some slides to go with that. I'm happy to answer questions, but I will just jump to the most recent update we have on a measure that we have been working with community members on regarding clean air rooms and just some action that our board recently has taken. So you might recall, those of you that were on the committee last summer, we had a successful clean air rooms pilot program that was a value-wide program not attached to AB 617. And based on the success of that, and then of course, as we've discussed many, many times with you all recently, and sort of increasingly severe wildfire smoke impacts, we have been working to continue to see that folks are able to create clean air rooms and use air filtration devices to protect their health. And so the governing board approved a new residential air filtration program specifically within the CERPs, or the community emissions reduction programs, in 3 communities, and that's South Central Fresno, Shafter, and Stockton. And so just really briefly, it mirrors our pilot program that we did, but in this case, as I mentioned, it's specific to those 3 communities. This uses the community air protection funds that were mentioned a little bit earlier, and it's separate from the typical expenditure of the community air protection funds, which, as Samir mentioned, are often primarily across the board spent on more heavy duty projects, off-road equipment, and a variety of more emissions reduction measures. This is more of an exposure reduction measure. We, of course, will make sure that the devices, as with our pilot program, are certified by the California Air Resources Board, are high efficiency, both for filtration and for energy. And what we're looking forward to the most is, and I'll just kind of skip forward since this is sort of a repeat of what we did with our pilot program, is how we're going to work with the communities to get these devices out there. So last summer, we directly shipped these to residents. We're also looking forward to, now that things are coming back and being more often done in person, working on in-person distribution events, really to a lot of the points that were brought up today of spreading the good word of a lot of the good work we're doing together, a lot of the collaborative work we're doing across the valley. And then, of course, for folks that maybe need to be there to pick up the device, provide that service to them. So we're really looking forward to kind of the different options to working with the community on digging a little deeper on implementing these. And we look forward to hopefully within the next 2 months being able to roll this out. So targeting before any smoke impacts happen this summer. So I know that was extraordinarily brief. I do have Brian with CARB with me. So I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you want to go straight to Brian and then I can take questions.
Yeah, let's do that, please. Brian, go ahead, please.
Great, thanks, Jessica. And it's nice to see you all again. As Jessica said, my name is Brian Moore, and I'm a supervisor in the Office of Community Air Protection at CARB. I have 3 quick updates since the last time we met. The first is on February 23rd. A few weeks ago, CARB did select the board 2 new communities for developments of emissions reductions plans. One, Bayview Hunters Point, which is in like South San Francisco, and then a collection of communities in the North Imperial area in Imperial County. So no selections were made in the San Joaquin Valley. And those air districts and the communities are beginning the process of forming their steering committees to begin. The second one is that tomorrow, March 8th, the AB 617 consultation group is meeting. I mean, if any of you are interested in attending or seeing the agenda, I can pass it on through Jessica. And the final and third update I have is that we have put together our draft annual update, and it is available for review and comment. Usually every year CARB releases an annual update, but this year we opened it up for comments. So if any of you all are interested in seeing the draft annual update, and it does get into what has been achieved over the last year in the program in general, and kind of how we're looking forward to updating the program. I can send that link also to Jessica for y'all to check out. And so with that, I'll just turn it back to you all with any questions, and thanks.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Brian, if you could send any of those documents to Jessica, that would help so that we can get it to all of the CAC members. Then that way they can get it out to their respective areas or whatever they're working on.
Will do.
Because I think that's important. So thank you. Let me go to the north. Any comments from the CAC of Jessica and Brian? Okay, hearing none, let's go to the south. Hearing none, let's bring it back here to the central. Any comments from any of the members of the CAC? Okay, let's open it up to the public in the north.
No public comment in the north.
Great, thank you. In the south?
No public comment in the south.
Great. Here in the central?
No members of the public in person or online.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. About Jessica and Brian, thank you very much.
Out of order, but I have a quick question for Jessica.
Oh, Jessica, before you run away.
Real fast, because I know we're late. I was looking at the presentation, we didn't get to go through the whole thing. And you're talking here, you had budgeted $1 million, looks like for each community, and with the idea to get out like 5,000 devices per community. Were you actually able to get that many devices out last year or more?
I see. Good question. Last year, the pilot program, that is about the cost per device, just scaled to the $1 million. The pilot program we did last year was only $250,000.
Okay.
But it just did turn out to be about $200 per device. So that's where that estimate comes from.
Were you able to fully fund and get that
Yes,
many
yes,
devices
and we spent
out?
all of that funding actually within a very short period of time. So we know it's a pretty high need measure.
Super, thank you.
Excellent, great, thank you. Okay. Let's go to item number 12, outreach and communications. Ms. Jamie Holt. Young lady, I know you're, so.
I'm fighting the cold that
I know.
everyone's had. We have quite a bit going on, of course, healthier living schools, everything is open. I will tell you, everyone is having events and activities and health fairs and conferences. So we're very busy with the team kind of putting all of that stuff together. We're out at schools on a regular basis. We still have some calendars. If you want to take calendars back to your constituents, we have them in all the regions. We're happy to get those to you. We also have been doing quite a bit of work with the AB 617 communities, doing in-community outreach on certain grant programs to make sure that that community is really aware of how easy some of these grant programs are. We tend to hear that folks don't really believe us when they see an ad saying that we're going to give you $4,000 or $5,000 for something. They're like, that seems fishy. So we really want folks to understand that, yes, that's legitimate and they can take advantage of it. And a lot of those amounts are actually valley-wide. They're not just in our AB 617 communities. We've been working to get that message out. While it doesn't seem like it, spring is just right around the corner. April is filled with Earth Day events. So if you are out and about or you hear of an event, please let us know. We'll be happy to go out and have a table, a booth at any of those events. And then we've been doing a lot more just general presentations. So if you have a group and you want us to come and talk about just general air quality issues, if you want us to focus specifically on grants or certain industry, we can definitely do that. Our team has been going out a lot in making sure that wherever possible, we give those presentations via Zoom or in person and let folks know kind of what's going on. That's all I have for right now.
Okay, any questions from the CAC in the north of Jamie on her presentation? Okay, hearing none up there. Let's go to the south. Any CAC members? Questions of Jamie on her? Okay, let's bring it here to the central. Any questions? I just want to thank you for all the work and effort and what you guys are doing, getting people back into existing and moving, and I think that's really important. Just, you know, we appreciate the staff's efforts and everything. You guys have done one heck of a job to the schools and everybody, and we thank you for all of that effort and your team. And I've done a great job, so thank you, Jamie. Any public comment of Jamie in the north?
No public comment in the north.
The south?
No public comment in the south.
Great, bring it here to the central.
No public comment in central or online.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Okay, CAC members, any comments? Mr. Williams, please.
Very quickly, in 10 seconds, sir, if I can. I just want to let you all know that the Environmental Justice Advisory Group did move forward the goals and objectives recommendation to the district at the last meeting. They also moved forward with the grants committee and incentive spending budget items recommendation to the district. So those two were taken care of, and I want to invite anybody who's never been to an EJAG meeting to please try to attend. You know, one of our goals and objectives is to have a more ongoing relationship between EJAG and the CAC. So while we encourage EJAG members to try to come to our meetings, I would also encourage anybody who's never been to one, you know, try to get to an EJAG meeting. It's the fourth Thursday. The next one will be on April 27th at 5:30, and it's in all 3 locations. So I'd encourage participation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other CAC member in the north? Any comments from anybody up there? Is it snowing? Chris, are you guys getting any snow or rain?
No snow that I'm aware of, but I've been inside for 2 hours, so I'm not sure.
Okay, great. Thank you again. Let me go to the south. CAC members, any comments of your own? Okay, let me bring it back here. I think the only thing I do want to let some folks know is that the comment was made about small rural community farmers and the program that we have developed. And Samir is 100% right. We've had more small farmers come into the program with the changes made last year for used new type tractors. And if it wasn't for the funding of farmer, that would have never happened. And just for tomorrow, for example, I have 13 small farmers coming to my office of different groups, and they're coming to fill out their applications. And that is, I mean, we've had a few of those in the past, but it is incredible to hear these farmers. And one farmer especially that I was so excited to get a call from him, an African-American farmer who's 56 years old, not in my age group, of course, I'm a little younger. But he was so excited, and he on the phone flat out said, and he's going to be at an event that we're working on, but that if it wasn't for the district in helping him get into a new Tier 3 tractor, he would have still had his 76 International diesel. And that diesel, that tractor smoked a little bit. You know, you thought it was fog sometimes. But when you hear those type of stories and from the growers, but to hear that from a small grower and just so excited and so happy that if it wasn't for what is going on here, and he tells his friends, and they can't believe it even, outside of California, that he has some relatives. And when he says that, it just makes me feel really good that we have met and are meeting those needs of those small farmers that still want to farm in this state, which is really hard for most farmers unless you're larger. So again, Samir, I want to say you guys have done, your team, Aaron and Todd and Ryan and all those folks have absolutely done a great job in taking care of those small farmers and designing the program to fit, even with ARB, with Aaron and Michelle and Lucina, all of them, and Michael Benjamin. Everybody's just been helping to make things happen. And so now even this funding is even more important, because to have that many small growers tomorrow come means they all have 0 tractors, Tier 0s, and we're putting them into something cleaner, either new or used. And you guys have done a great job at that. And that's my personal comment, but I just want to say thank you to everybody and for the work. Again, I want to thank all of the CAC, and I apologize for going over the time limit. I'm terrible for that. Sometimes somebody needs to throw things at me or have somebody hit me with a water bottle or something. But again, I thank, okay, that's easy. That's a soft one. But I thank you all very, very much, and have a great week, and keep praying for rain and snow. So thank you all.